Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the MCU Perspectives. Before I actually start this vlog though, there are some things that I want to say. For starters, I apologize if I'm out of it at any if I feel like I'm out of it during this vlog. I have kind of come down with something. Short version involved a toothache that just got worse. My jaw is in pain and I am currently waiting for swelling to go down. I pretty much need to call a dentist and get a tooth removed, but I'm trying, and I did consider briefly delaying this vlog, but I figure I might be able to get through it like this. I've done vlogs before where I've been sick, so I don't know, I can probably do this. Secondly, the Marvel Cinematic Universe has kind of been in the news as of late. If you're not aware, a few days prior to when this video was recorded, it was announced that Sony and Disney were ending their partnership, so to speak which means that Spider-Man would be out of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, from what now, while this did disappoint me, I've heard rumors today that Disney and Sony have struck a new deal, but nothing concrete has come of it. As such, until the news is confirmed that a new deal actually has been reached, I'm kind of trying to be careful with how much I spread, but if that's the case, it'd be cool. It'd be nice seeing more Spider-Man films in the MCU, and I'll be getting into my thoughts on those when we actually get to them in these vlogs. But as for the future of the MCU perspectives, I will still be discussing the Spider-Man films that are part of the MCU, including Far From Home, and if there are any future films that come out that are a part of the MCU, I'll probably discuss those too. Otherwise, if it turns out this whole thing is bullplop, then Spider-Man's journey into the Marvel Cinematic Universe and these vlogs will end at Far From Home. So, yeah. But anyway, we're not here to talk about all that. We're instead here to talk about the 12th film to be released as part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Ant-Man. And of course, since it's a solo film, I should probably get into my personal history with Ant-Man prior to seeing this film. And I first discovered Ant-Man in the ad of a comic book. The ad pretty much was meant to advertise Ant-Man, and the whole idea with him was that he was the tiniest superhero of all, and the ad pretty much showed him in silhouette standing proudly on a group of down bad guys, just looking so tiny. And when I first saw the ad, I thought, "Is this guy a joke?" I, honest to God, thought he was a joke superhero. That there couldn't be an actual superhero called Ant-Man whose power was that he shrinks. That that sounds that sounded stupid. But as time went on, I started seeing that Ant-Man actually was a legitimate superhero in the Marvel universe, which actually did still make me scratch my head, especially when he made an appearance in the Fantastic Four animated series with the Hank Pym Ant-Man, wherein he and Reed Richards briefly talked, and it was in the episode the Fantastic Four started shrinking, so he was useful. And I unknowingly saw more of Ant-Man in the Ultimate Avengers films, wherein Hank Pym, the first Ant-Man, was experimenting with being the Giant Man persona. Hold on a second. Sorry about that. Heads up, I might end up pausing this frequently to reorient myself. But anyway, yeah. As such, I started seeing more and more of Ant-Man in the Marvel universe, but I still sort of thought of him as kind of a joke character, a superhero whose only power was that he could shrink, and I thought to myself, why? At least Spider-Man actually does do superheroic stuff, but how is shrinking kind of... But unless you can get bigger, I don't see how shrinking could be a viable superpower. Nevertheless, I did start accepting him more as part of the Marvel universe when I saw more about him. And then, of course, when they eventually said that they were going to be doing an Ant-Man film for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, my thought was, "Oh, cool." And they even did make fun of the fact that it was a superhero called, well, Ant-Man in the trailers, as the trailers had a scene where Hank Pym was talking to the new Ant-Man and saying, "I need you to be the Ant-Man," and his response was, "Huh. Question: Is it too late to change the name?" And yeah, that it showed that even they were that they were kind of not taking this whole thing seriously as seriously as they should. So Yeah, it showed that they seemed to be having a sense of humor, and again, Marvel Cinematic Universe, they already had my money. So, it was something I was going to go see. So, as a result, I did end up going to see it, and I remembered liking it. I remember having fun. And but now that I'm now a few years later, what do I think of it? What do I still think it's fun? Well, let's talk about the plot summary. Again, this is probably going to be a while, and also I'm gonna probably need to pull out my phone because it has all my notes on it. So apologies. But anyway, yeah, the film actually opens up in 1989 as we see the Triskelion being built. In this case, we see the founders of S.H.I.E.L.D., in this case, Howard Stark, Peggy Carter, and some third guy whose name I don't even remember, are in a meeting when Hank Pym walks in, played by, hold on, I think, played by Michael Douglas. Yeah, sorry, I'm bad with names. Michael Hank is going in there because apparently he was supposed to be on a trip to Russia, but he decided to take a slight detour and look at the Stark Industries weapons department. And what he found was them attempting to replicate something called the Pym particles. And the Pym particles are essentially an isotope that Hank Pym created himself. It essentially, short version, it shrinks things down, but increases their density. So like, say for example, you got exposed to Pym particles, you would be shrunken down, but you could still be mobile, and you could probably still cause some damage. Like for example, if someone was watching you while they were if someone tried taking a punch at you while you were smaller, you could climb up you could jump up their arm and then deliver an uppercut right to their face and knock them down. Pretty much, so in other words, yeah, it's kind of a valuable asset. It can make your soldiers more versatile in battle, but of course, the fact that they're trying to do this at all kind of gets to Hank as he doesn't really want to share the Pym particles, and it's kind of under the pretense of he doesn't want anyone, and he realized, like he says later, that the reason he doesn't want to share them is because he thinks they're dangerous. What makes you wonder why even he uses them. But the pretense is that he doesn't want anyone evil getting their hands on them. Of course, the third guy says that they need the Pym particles, that they're a valuable asset, yada yada yada. But Hank says that Hank's still not willing to help out, but is still not willing to share them. And the guy hits a nerve with Hank when he says, if you done more, if you would you have done more to help save Janet, which causes Hank to pretty much slam the guy's head onto his desk. At which point Hank pretty much makes it clear that he quits and he walks out. The guy initially wants them to send security after Hank, but Howard Stark says no, he's not a security. He's not a problem. He's not gonna be a problem. He's not a problem unless we make him one. As such, he just lets him go and kind of lets him go on his merry way. As such, we cut 2 years later in the present day where we're introduced to the current Ant-Man, Scott Lang, as he's being let out of the San Quentin Penitentiary. I think he's being let out of San Quentin Penitentiary. Sorry, using notes. Yeah, San Quentin. Yeah. As he's being let out, he meets a friend of his from the outside named Luis. Essentially, he went to prison because he worked at, I think, like, correct me if I got these details wrong, but he pretty much worked at banking a banking service that was embezzling its customers. As such, he hacked into their servers and not only and pretty much leaked the information out, and add insult to injury, he drove a big guy's car into a pool. However, as a result of this, he got sentenced 3 years in prison. As such, he's now out, and he wants to try and he's now trying to do something with his life, trying to go on the mend. Like, Luis tries telling him he's got a tip for a new job, but Scott wants nothing to do with it, because he's trying to go straight. He even gets a job at Baskin Robbins, which he's ultimately fired from, because as they say, hold on, Baskin Robbins always finds out. And they do. They found out his criminal record, and while the boss thought it was cool, he had to can him. But Scott is still determined to get his life in order, especially since, well, he's got a daughter. A daughter named Cassie. And Cassie loves him, and he loves her, but unfortunately, because of his criminal record, Cassie's mom and her current husband, a cop, or her current fiance, don't want Scott anywhere near her. And pretty much, and on top of that, Scott is kind of losing visitation rights, and he desperately needs to get money for, and he's trying to get as much money as he can for, I know what it's, oh yeah, child support. He needs to pay child support. But unfortunately, again, nobody is willing to take a nobody's willing to take a thief who served 3 years in prison. As such, eventually Scott kind of breaks down and goes to Luis and decides he wants to take the tip. As such, Luis breaks down that pretty much short version, and I can't easily describe it. Because Luis has this way of describing where he gets his facts, and it pretty much goes, I talked to this one guy, I talked to this one guy, who got the tip from this guy, who got the tip from that guy, etc., and it kind of goes all the way forward to him. And I recommend just seeing just kind of looking it up online, because it's worth watching just kind of for the comedic timing. But anyway, Luis, pretty much the short version is that there's an old guy who is actually there's an old guy who's out of his house for a week, and he has a vault hidden deep in his house that might be able to have the cash they need to be able to pay off that Scott could use to pay off his child support. As such, Scott decides that that he'll do this job just for the cash. As such, their little group is assembled because there were two other guys there. Their names were Kirk and Dave. I apologize if I forget their names throughout the rest of the video. I don't remember them as much. But pretty much with their help, he's able to get into the house, bypass the security, and get through the various vault doors, as each one is more intricate than the last. One requires a lock, one requires a fingerprint, one is an older type of vault that he had to pretty much. That was my dog. Sorry. That he had to blow up from the inside using liquid nitrogen, using water and liquid nitrogen. But even when he goes through all that, when he gets into the vault, all he finds is a suit, which he thinks is just a little strange. As such, he thinks that maybe this is a waste of time, but not wanting to go empty-handed, he ends up taking the suit anyway. However, we soon learn that the person that owns this house, is in fact Hank Pym. And I suppose I should probably talk about him and what's going on with him. It turns out, we see him in present day as we see... the next time we see him in the movie, he's in present day. It's present day, and he's older now, having more white in his hair. And he's going to visit... Pym Tech... what was it called? Oh yeah, Pym Tech, a company that he founded and is now being run by his former protege, Darren Cross, with his daughter, Hope Van Dyne, being his secretary, so to speak, I think. I think she's a shareholder, but don't quote me on that. And pretty much Hank has been invited here because Darren wants to show him something. It turns out that again, in this universe, it turns out that in the MCU, Hank Pym was Ant-Man in the beginning. In the early day, he was kind of an early days type of superhero. It's like a hero that appeared before we officially started tuning into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but still existed. And for a while, he was pretty much a soldier, using the Pym particle to go in and out of places that other soldiers couldn't get into, taking out enemies with ease. But he was pretty much considered an urban legend. And anytime anyone asked about him, he just said that Ant-Man wasn't real. Well, it turns out that the dear Dr. Cross, and yeah, he's the villain, if you can't tell just by that name. Later on, he ends up liquefying a guy just for disagreeing with him. Darren Cross, it turns out, dog right there, sorry, actually does believe that Ant-Man was a real person, and as he gets a bunch of security footage from a bunch of other from various battles and assaults where if you zoom in long enough, you can see a little person just going nuts around there. Of course, Hank doesn't openly admit what's going on, but Darren reveals that he thinks that he's managed to create the means to actually rival Ant-Man, and that is his own suit, a suit called the Yellow Jacket suit. Essentially, like with the Ant-Man suit, it can cause the user to shrink and grow at ease, and it's supposed to be able to increase their strength when they shrink down. but it has these little stingers on it that can shoot lasers, and it can be pretty much and pretty much it's supposed to be an effective killing machine. And it's something that Darren Cross wants to mass produce and sell. Of course, Hank is not exactly happy about this, and it turns out that Hank and Hope have actually been kind of in cahoots about this. As we learn later, Hope wound up contacting Hank the instant she learned about what Darren was trying to do. As such, Hope and Hank realize that they need help. That they need to find a way to get this suit away from Darren. And of course, but as unfortunate, because they still have a window of opportunity, as despite the fact that Darren has a suit, it's not fully operational yet, as they have not yet mastered how to shrink someone without turning them into goo. But like I mentioned with the guy that disagreed with him that he shrunk. This was like another board member or something who said that there were some ethical laws that they couldn't abide by, and so as a result, he shrunk him, turned him into a little blot of goop, and then just flushed him down the toilet. So yeah, the shrinking process is not perfected yet. So they still have a window of opportunity. Hope wants to go in herself, thinking that she can take him out. But Hank says, no, I know a guy. Which is where we get back to Scott. Scott, of course, is curious about the suit that he stole, and so he decides to put it on, and it seems to fit him well enough. But he finds that there are a bunch of switches and buttons and so forth, like a belt and the gloves. There are these two buttons. One button, when he presses that, doesn't seem to do anything, but when he presses the other one, he suddenly shrinks. At which point he realizes that something's up, and then Hank starts talking through and starts actually communicating with him via the headpiece, saying that this is his first trial run. And of course, it is a big trial run because Louisa ends up going into the bathroom because that's where he was trying on the suit, and turns on the faucet of a bathtub because he was in the bathtub when he shrunk. And pretty much she has to get away, and pretty much she's trying to outrun the water, get out of there. And pretty much the next minute is him just now shrunk, trying to run around people, not getting squished, being thrown all over the place as he's trying to reorient himself. Until eventually he's thrown out of the building and lands on a guy's car, and manages to grow back to normal size. Hank tells him over his headset that he thinks that he can keep the suit, though that he'll be in contact. But just from that one little experience, Scott wants to get as far away from. Sorry about that. Anyways, I was saying, Scott, after that little incident, wants nothing to do with this. So he actually ends up going back to Hank's house later that night in an attempt to just put the suit back, only for the cops to show up and hold him at gunpoint. And of course, one of the cops is his wife's fiance, and so this will probably end up putting him further back in the progress he's made with his family. Only when he's waiting in his jail cell, Hank wants to see him, claiming to be his lawyer. Hank then gives Scott an ultimatum. He can either just spend the rest of his life rotting in jail, or he can go back to his jail, or he can go back to his cell and await further instructions. As such, Scott does that, and suddenly when he sees a small group of ants coming in with the suit, which they then activate and allows him to put it on. And so with it, he's able to escape, riding on he's able to get out of the building, which in turn causes a kind of a security lockdown and a sweep of a 5-mile radius. Sorry about that. But Scott is able to escape on the back of a flying ant that he later names Antony. But in the process, he flies so high that he ends up passing out. When he wakes up, he's met with Hope, who doesn't exactly trust him. Hold on a second. Sorry about that again. Dog wanted to go out. Anyways, I was saying when he wakes up, he's met by Hope, who doesn't exactly trust him, and even has these. I don't remember the exact terms for each of the ants, but pretty much these are attack ants surrounding his bed, and as she says, they're to watch him when she's not there. And so she tells Scott that Hank is waiting downstairs to talk with him. And so Scott gets out of bed, and he ends up going downstairs to meet with Hank and Hope. And pretty much they're just getting he's just getting the general laydown of what the PIM particle and how it works. And of course, And pretty much Hank says that he's actually been watching Scott and knows a lot about him, about why he went to jail in the first place, about his family, his daughter, how he's trying to make himself better. But of course, Hope seems to be very bitter about all this, and she obviously doesn't think Scott is up to the task that they have for him. But Hank, for one reason or another, doesn't want Hope to actually go. Doesn't want Hope wearing the suit. As such, they end up heading downstairs. They end up going. As such, she brings Scott downstairs and explains the whole history with the Pym particle and his connection to Darren Cross, and how Darren was his protege, but he never shared with him the secret of the Pym particle. And so once Darren heard about this, he kind of got obsessed with it and wanted to know more about it, which eventually led to him kind of going off the deep end, and even and being and having Hank voted out of his own company, with Hope actually being the deciding vote, because apparently Hope and Hank haven't been seeing eye to eye for years. And the reason for this is because of whatever happened to Hope's mother, Janet Van Dyne. Apparently, like, something happened to her, and Hank says that she apparently died in a plane crash, but Hope doesn't buy that for a second. So she's just kind of held it over her dad, and so she's kind of held it over her dad's head, especially when after she disappeared, so to speak, he became emotionally distant from her. Now Scott, of course, when Scott hears all this, he thinks this is just kind of way out of his league. He shouldn't be doing any of this. And of course Hope agrees, but of course Hank still doesn't want to do it. But he says but he managed to convince Scott by saying we should do this not for our own sakes, but for our families, for our daughters. We're not trying to save the world or make a better place for us, but for a better place for them. And so Scott agrees with that. And so Hank tells him what the job is. It turns out what Hank wants Scott to do is that he wants him to break into Pym Tech and steal the Yellow Jacket suit before it gets a chance to be sold. Because it turns out that the shield guy that Hank wound up bashing his head into, bashing his head, who Hank bashed his head into a table. Yeah, it turns out he was Hydra. It's the reason why he was so gung ho about getting the Pym particle, and why he wanted to sick the dogs on Hank when he quit Shield. So yeah, pretty much seeing that Cross has built something similar to something similar to Hank, he's of course interested and wants to buy it. And so Hank knows that if this suit is fully operational and sold on the market, it could lead to disaster. As such, he wants to go in and steal the suit before it's market ready, so to speak. And that's why he got Scott. Not only is Scott kind of a meat shield, because not only is Scott expendable because he's not family, but Scott is an expert thief and can hack in, and he thinks that his skills would be invaluable in breaking into Pym Tech and getting the Yellow Jacket suit. As such, we get a nice little montage as we see Scott learning the ins and outs of what he can do. First he has to learn how to shrink and grow in the midst of action by running down a hall, just jumping through a keyhole, and then coming out the other side and growing again. He has to learn about all various types of ants. There are hyperactive ones that can give an electrical charge, and if used properly can probably shorten something out. There are larger, more aggressive ants. There are ones that can fly. Ones that can, there's ones that can form enough of a colony to create things that can help you. And of course, he has to learn how to fight, because again, the Pym particle expands density. Expands the density, so you need to learn how to fight in order to actually be able to do your job properly, because in that state you're as Hope puts it, you're like a bullet. So hit someone too hard, you could kill them. Hit someone too softly, it's just like a love tap. So you need to know how to throw a punch. As such, we do get a nice montage of seeing all this in play, and of course one of Scott's tests is that he has to learn how to control ants. But and how Hank does this is that he has this little earpiece that syncs his brainwaves up to them, and through his brain he can tell the ants to just do whatever he wants. He can talk to them, and it's like talking to them, so to speak. Scott tries it, but it doesn't exactly work out for him. But when Hope tries it, not only is she an expert at it, but she seems to be able to control all the ants in the house to the point where she almost clouds out all the light. And yeah, it's obvious that whatever she taps into to control it, it's a dark place. But of course, she still is angry at her dad because she thinks that she's being passed over for Scott, who's nothing. However, as she's in the middle of this crisis, Scott goes to talk to her and does explain how the reason he has me is to protect you. I'm expendable. You're not. You're his daughter. So he doesn't want you getting hurt. This in turn helps lighten kind of this in turn helps her grow to like him more, and so she gives him a tip of how to control the ants to clear his mind and think about what drives him. And in this case, it's his daughter Cassie. As with that advice, he's able to control the ants and have them spin a coin, and so he learned, and so he realizes, and so he's getting better and better at using his abilities. And so there's one more thing they have to steal, a device that Hank built while in his shield days. It's essentially supposed to disrupt the coils in the vault where they keep the electric coils in the vault where they keep the. Pretty much, it's essentially just a system it's essentially a device that's supposed to keep the security system in the vault where they keep the Yellow Jacket suit busy so that it won't detect them. And before Pym left, he learned that it was collecting. He said it was collecting dust in an old Stark warehouse. So they have Scott go there by taking a plane, shrunken down with all of his ants, and pretty much doing jumping a tactical squad to what they think is an empty warehouse. Only it turns out that the warehouse is actually Avengers Mansion. It's the Avengers base. So yeah, Scott's diving right into the Avengers stronghold, and Hank doesn't really want the Avengers' help, mostly because he doesn't want his technology back in the hands of a Stark, in this case Tony, and he thinks the Avengers have bigger things to worry about anyway. So he doesn't really want them knowing about what he's doing at all. Especially like hell, even earlier in the film when Scott suggested they do that, he just brush it. Just they go to the Avengers, Hank just brush it off. But eventually, we see that. But Scott decides that he needs to go through anyway. He's going to go through it anyway because it looks like nobody's home. As such, he dives right onto the roof of the base, only for Falcon to come out and investigate because he tripped an alert. As such, Falcon through his technology is able to spot Scott, and so Scott has to reveal himself and says, "Hey, I'm Ant-Man. Look, I need something here that'll help me save the world." But of course, Falcon thinks that Falcon has to follow procedure. This guy's an intruder. He broke into their base, so he needs to be taken care of. So it leads to an actually really fun fight scene between Ant-Man and Falcon as we actually see the full range of how far Scott's come with learning about the suit, as he's jumping around, throwing punches, dodging everything, shrinking at certain points of the fight, shrinking down to avoid things and growing back up to deliver a hit or landing hits when he's small. It's actually a really fun fight scene that helps show Scott's skill with the Ant-Man suit. Eventually, he gets him into into the warehouse area of the mansion, and it results in him knocking Falcon aside and getting into Falcon's suit and damaging his tech, so that Falcon can't fight him anymore. And so he manages to steal the device and get out of there. With Falcon asking whoever's on his comm system not to tell Cap about this. And while Scott is rightfully chewed out for going in gung ho, he still gets a slight pat on the back for still getting the device that they needed. As such, they decide that they need to charge into Pym Tech that night, but Cross, it turns out, has come to visit, and Cross doesn't know that Hope is actually working with Hank, as he has a thing for Hope, and so he thinks that she's the only one that understands him, since she was also pushed out of Hank's life. And so he supposedly doesn't know that Hope is working behind his back. But things are still getting but he says he wants to invite Hank for something big, and what that big thing is it turns out that he managed to perfect the shrinking tech, as part of his test involved shrinking baby goats, and of course, like with the executive, every test seemed to have them turn into goop. However, one test actually managed to be successful, which means that now they perfected shrinking organic matter. Which means now they have a working suit, so they need to hurry up and so Cross wants to invite Hank to personally be there for that the night when he sells it. Though he doesn't say what it is, he says it's just something big. But he and Hank have kind of talk, and Hank talk. But before Cross leaves, he asks Hank, "What did you see in me? What did you see in me all those years?" And Hank says, "I saw myself." And so Cross's response is, and I know it, and I typed it out because this is a good scene, because these are good dialogue. And he says, "Then why did you push me away?" And Hank says, "Because I saw too much of myself." And yeah, it's just a nice little line of dialogue that shows just how far Hank could have fallen and just how far Cross has. But after Cross leaves, he calls Hope, and he says he wants to double security because he thinks that something's going to happen. As such, they think that they're kind of out of ways to break into Pym Tech, but Scott has a backup plan. As he ends up calling Luis, Kirk, and Dave, and he wants to bring them in on this. Hank, of course, thinks this is stupid, because these guys seem kind of like idiots, but they do go through with it anyway. And pretty much Scott's plan is that if all the main entrances are blocked off, then they'll have to go through the waterways, as they can't block those off no matter how hard they try. And pretty much what their plan is this: Kirk and Dave will be outside in the getaway van and be working reconnaissance. Luis will go in dressed as a security guard and try and get into more area to try and be sure to cover Scott, Hank's, and Hope's asses. Hank and Hope will play their roles while Hope does some small subterfuge, while Scott has to go in through the air ducts and disable the security and plant explosives or implosives, whatever, so that once they take the suit, nothing can be replicated. Nothing can be replicated with the electric. Not only when they can fry the mainframe, delete all data, pretty much make sure that no production of Cross's Pym particles can be continued, and just pretty much wipe everything clean. Which I'm guessing a lot of people are going to lose their jobs because of this. But hey, an asshole got us come up, and so that's what counts. But anyway, yeah. So the plan does seem to have a few snags, of course. As when Hank tries going into the building, he's stopped by the police because after Scott broke out, his ex-wife's fiance has been trying to find any connection to Scott, and Hank was the last person that saw him, so he thinks that Hank is the one that he needs to talk to. But it's ultimately stopped when Dave steals their car and just goes joyriding with it until he crashes it into a tree. This is why you don't leave your keys in the car. But Luis manages to get in via a security outfit that Hope gave him to give him clearance. He guards her while Hope goes into a mainframe room and puts in the little device that they had to pretty much give the security phony readings. While Louise has to go in and still cover Scott's ass, including while Scott managed to get into the waterways, they're able to take out a couple guards. Louise is able to switch uniforms, and they're able to get into the main room. And they're able to get in the main room where they set all the explosives and set them for I think 15 minutes. Charges, yes. 15 minutes. And the last step is that they have to also cut down this laser grid. Pretty much, it's a small grid that leads right into the vault, and pretty much anything that goes through it will get fried if it hits them, if it hits any of the lasers. So yeah, they gotta shut that down. While Scott is able to make it in, and they're able to fry the mainframe so that all the data is deleted. And they hit the snag when when the police come back to the Pym Tech building, and one of the guy and I think either Dave or Kirk, sorry, either Dave or Kirk hit the one of accidentally honking the horn of their truck, and here's the thing, Scott's van has a very distinctive honk, which I think is the do 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 or some other tune. And Scott, when he went to go see his daughter for her birthday, he played that when he was leaving. So the instant they hear that, they realize that that Scott's somehow involved in all this, and so they go to the van. And this is when they're in the process of trying to hack that little laser grid. And so it leads to a struggle with the fiance and his partner, while Dave and Kirk are just fighting to try and stay in the van and hit enter when everything's up to 100%. And they do, and while they are pulled out of the van, they do manage to still they still manage to shut down the grid enough for Scott to jump in and try and grab the suit. Only when he gets in there, the suit is pulled out of his grasp and ejected from the vault. And it turns out the reason for this is because Cross actually knew what they were doing. It turns out that night when he went to go see Hank and invite him to this, it turns out that he wasn't there to actually. It turns out that he wasn't there to invite Hank to this. He was there to kill him. But he discovered that Hope was there, and so he just kind of hit pause on that. It turns out that he's actually been doing some digging. He learned about Scott Lang being the new Ant-Man. He was able to figure out what their plan was, and he was able to trick. And he pretty much played everyone into thinking that he didn't know what they were doing. And so he now has Scott trapped in the vault, while he now has the Yellow Jacket suit in a little tube that he puts in a briefcase. And on top of that, hold on a sec. Sorry about that. Had to let my dog in. Anyway, yeah, as I was saying, he led Hank and Hope to the vault where the Yellow Jacket suit is, and as well as the Shield/Hydra guy that Hank who Hank bashed his face into. And so they managed to ultimately, and so they say he's going to be selling it to Hydra. Though he's going to be leaving he's going to be keeping the particles for himself. He's going to sell the suit to Hydra, though Cross says he's going to be keeping the particles for himself. Pretty much supply and demand. If they want to power the suit, they got to come to him for the particles. So yeah, it's pretty much just an egomania. As such, he wants to get ready to kill Hank. As such, he wants to kill Hank because he thinks that he betrayed him by giving Scott all the information he has on the suit. But Hope makes her allegiances bare when she points a gun at people holding up Hank. And Hope tries to talk down Cross, because something they mentioned is that the Pym particles can affect the brain patterns. And so she thinks that this isn't Cross, that he can get through this. And Cross, for a second, seems to look like that he's realizing that what he's doing is wrong. But no, it just turns out he wants to shoot Hank himself. However, Hope is able to use the various ants to stop the gun from going off. And Scott is able to escape from the vault by using some of the technology they had. They managed, before they went in, they created these little stars that, when thrown at something, can cause it to either shrink or grow. And so he throws one of the growing ones at the vault, and it causes the glass to expand and blow up, allowing him to escape and start taking out the guards, though in the resulting shootout, Hank is shot. As such, Cross grabs the suit and makes a run for it, while the Shield guy, and I'm just going to keep calling him Shield guy, I don't remember his name, ends up grabbing the particles from one of the dead guys. And so Hope says that she's going to stay behind and care for her dad, while Scott has to go after Cross. On top of that, still charges are still set, so this building is going to be going up soon. But it turns out Hank actually has an escape plan, as he carried around a keychain that had what looked like a little model tank on it. Turns out it wasn't a model; it was actually a real thing that he just shrunk down. As such, they make it grow. I'm guessing they had one of those stars and they just threw it on it. And so they're able to escape from the building. In the meantime, Scott is fighting through more of the security, and at one point he seems pinned down until Luis comes in to save him. But so he's able to make it to the roof, where Cross starts shooting at him and winds up hitting Anthony. Anthony pause to pay respects to Anthony. Anyway, but he manages to get on. But he manages to get onto a But he manages to get onto the chopper that Cross is on. As a result, Cross ends up trying to shoot at him, but he ends up shooting more of the people. I'm guessing, including the shield guy, because I don't think we ever see him again. But as things continue getting worse and worse, but things are just getting worse and worse, and so Scott makes it clear to Cross that he's pretty much screwed, as it turns out, as we see the charges go off and the building pretty much collapse on itself into a singularity. I'm hoping that no one was in there, because if they were, then they're all dead now. But that pretty much ensures that all progress he made with the Pym particle in that place are now gone, and so yeah, he's obviously mad. In the midst of the chaos, though, Scott ends up getting the helicopter ends up hitting turbulence, and Scott ends up falling out of the helicopter and grabs onto a guy's tie to hold on. But it turns out the briefcase ends up getting knocked open, and so when Scott comes back in, it turns out that Cross has now put on the Yellow Jacket suit. I have no idea how he managed to get it big, but yeah, pretty much now he's pissed and now is ready to throw caution to the wind, as now he just wants Scott dead, not just for taking what he thinks is rightfully his, but also just for ruining his entire operation. And it leads to a really nice fight, as we actually do see an even match between them, as they both end up shrinking and growing in various ways as they keep flying around, and they both end up getting. And of course, since Yellow Jacket has these lasers into the back of his suit, he can still shoot things. And eventually, the fight ends with them going in a briefcase and falling out of the helicopter as it goes crashing down, because in the midst of the fight, the pilots were injured or possibly killed. I don't know. And the briefcase ends up falling into the backyard the backyard pool of this family that's out having a barbecue, and Cross comes out and almost kills them, only for Scott to come out and fight them. And in the midst of the fight, he manages to knock Cross into a bug zapper, supposedly killing him. However, before he can land a final blow, that's when the police show up, as they hear all the commotion, and before Scott can explain what's going on, the fiancé tases him. Scott ends up waking up in the back of his police car, and the guy's intent is just to bring him back to jail, but Scott's trying to tell him, no, you don't understand, there's something in that backyard that needs to be killed, that needs to be destroyed. But the guy just thinks that Scott's losing it, to which I respond with, dude, you live in the Marvel universe. Even if you weren't willing to believe him, it's probably best to hear him out. But by that same token, you may think Scott is insane. But by another token, a tank burst out of a building, and the entire place went pretty much imploded on itself in a singularity. I don't think you're gonna have much. I think at this point you probably should have learned to expect the unexpected. However, that conversation is put to a halt as they get a report over the radio that there's an incident going on at the house of Scott's ex-wife, and it turns out that Cross is still alive, as when he was thrown into the bug zapper, he did get shocked, but the resulting electricity managed to still hit him and jumpstart his heart again, so he was able to escape. And so, since he did research on Scott, he knows about Cassie, and so he thinks that if he can he's going to get to Scott through her. And so, as such, they end up driving back there, and Scott manages to get out of his cuffs by getting his head back into his helmet and turning on and shrinking down out of the cuffs. But he manages to confront Cross in his daughter's room, and so they once again continue their battle as the battle leads to her model train set. Scott is able to call any ants that are nearby to give him aid against Cross, and it leads to a very funny but also very action-packed fight as they continue trying to outmaneuver each other, using whatever they can to fight, etc., etc. It's all really fun and good, but things are just getting even more out of hand as Scott is throwing some more of those star things, and it's causing more things to grow, like a little Thomas the Tank Engine suddenly gets burst right through the wall of the house, and an ant suddenly grows to, like, dog size. And of course, the fiancé managed to get up to the room, and he sees Yellow Jacket threatening Cassie, and he tries to save her, but again, he's not letting Cassie go anywhere. If he wants Scott to suffer, he's got to make her suffer. And so Scott realizes that the best way that he wants to take out, that if he wants to take Cross out, he needs to disable his suit. But the only way he can do that is if he gets inside, and unfortunately, that's not something that's possible. Well, it turns out there actually is a way. Something I actually forgot about. Something that I actually wound up forgetting about was actually what happened to Janet. And this is something that I'm kind of shaming myself for, because it's actually a very emotional, because it actually is a nice reveal. It turns out that, yeah, just like in the main Marvel universe, Janet actually was a superhero as well. She learned about Hank's career as Ant-Man, she wanted in, and so he agreed and made her a suit that made her own suit, with giving her the codename the Wasp. They were partners and fought crime together, but on one mission the Soviets managed to get a missile and launched it. Scott Hank had to, in order to disable the missile, they had to get inside the missile and disable it, but they were running out of time and they couldn't cut through the hide of the missile. The only way they could do that is by going subatomic. Pretty much what that is that it's shrinking so small that you can fit right through the atoms. And the only way they can do that is by turning off something in the suit called a regulator, which helps ensure how big or small they can get. And earlier, Scott wanted to mess with this because he thought it limited the suit, but Hank said that if they turned off the regulator, then by going subatomic, they would just keep shrinking and shrinking until they went to something called the quantum realm, a place where space and time are meaningless, as you're just shrinking for eternity, forgetting everything you care about. As such, to shut down the missile, Janet shut off her own regulator and flew into the missile and managed to disable it. But ever since that day, she's been lost in the quantum realm. As such, Scott, being in the same situation, realizes that the only way he can save Cassie is by he has to disable his own regulator and get into Yellow Jacket's suit. As such, he disables the regulator and shrinks right into his suit, and then just starts tearing it apart from the inside out, pretty much causing things to malfunction. And for every little bit of damage he does on the inside, it damages something on the outside, until eventually he destroys the flow of the pin particles through his suit, which in turn causes the suit to pretty much shrink at random all over the place until he's eventually just kind of ripped apart. So yeah, that's another villain dead. But of course, there's still the problem of the regulator, as Scott is now just shrinking infinitely, as he keeps shrinking and shrinking and shrinking, and the entire time Cassie is just calling out to him, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy, Daddy," and then just little by little he finds himself losing it. He finds himself losing himself until he eventually winds up in the subatomic realm. But he still can hear Cassie calling out for him, and it manages to get him aware enough that he's able to find a way out of this. As it turns out, as he takes one of those little stars, opens up his belt where the regulator is, and puts it in, and locks it in and turns it on, and allows him to, and the added power allows him to regrow back into our realm of existence. As such, Scott is now heralded as a hero, and thanks to him saving Cassie and taking down Cross, pretty much the fiance is no longer wants to arrest him. In this case, during the time that he broke out, he said that you were it's like the security cameras seem to have malfunctioned, but I told everyone you were processed normally. He's allowed to be with his family again, and on top of that, Hank now has hope that he'll be able to see Janet again, because if Scott was able to go to the quantum realm and come back, maybe he can go in and maybe he can find a way to bring Janet out, because apparently he's been trying to do that for the last 20 years, and, well, that's part of the reason why he's been so distant. He's just been trying to find a way to get her back. In the meantime, though, Scott has managed to rekindle his relationship with his family, as they're now all happy he's a superhero willing to protect people and so forth. They're all sitting down for dinner. Cassie kept the ant from before as a pet. But of course, then Scott gets a call from Luis, who says that he's got another tip for him. And pretty much we see him go through his other montage as he learns from his cousin, as he learned a tip from his cousin, who learned a tip from a girl at a bar, and the bartender was Stan Lee. Again, gotta mention those until he doesn't appear anymore. And he learned from the girl at the bar that an Avenger, specifically Falcon, was looking for Ant-Man for something. And so the reason he went to her was so that she would go to Luis's cousin, and then his cousin would go to Luis because he has an in with Ant-Man. And pretty much what they want is that they want Ant-Man is that pretty much short version. Ant-Man's now got an in with the Avengers, so that's something, and that's where the movie ends. But of course, being a Marvel film, we still got our credits endings, and of course the first one is we see Hank talking to Hope and saying that he does feel sorry. He is sorry for how he's treated her, and he thinks that power can't be destroyed, but we can probably control who has it. And so he reveals to Hope that before Janet disappeared, she and him were working on a new prototype Wasp suit. It's not complete yet, but Hank says that they now realize that they were making it for Hope, and so he thinks that if they work together, they'll be able to finish it. And on top of, but then of course you also got another post-credit scene, and this one doesn't really have anything to do with Ant-Man, but it does involve a greater scope in the Marvel Universe, as we end up cutting to this little dark room, and in the room we see Falcon is there. The Cap winds up walking in, and it turns out that Bucky is there too. His arm held in place by one of those metal holding things. And so yeah, they managed to find Bucky, but of course they think that they say that this would have been easier if they had found him 2 weeks ago, and so they're saying, well, what can we do? And so they're saying, well, should we call Stark? And he's like, no, he probably would. No, he might not listen, and even if he was willing, the Accords, as they say, would probably stop him. So what do we do? And Falcon says he knows a guy, and that's where the film ends. And that's where that ends. And where that goes, we'll be seeing next movie. But for now, what did I think of Ant-Man? I thought it was fun. Like, I don't think it's great. I don't think it's a great superhero film, but for what we got here, it was a very entertaining and very good movie. Its strengths, of course, I think one of its strengths is that it feels less like, in some way it feels kind of like a heist movie, but unlike other heist movies where the main characters are in some way the underdog criminals who you still kind of want to root for, these guys are actually the heroes, and the guy they're stealing from is the villain, and it actually is very intricate and it's kind of nice. On top of that, the main characters are all a lot of fun and easy to work off of. Scott Lang is a very sympathetic character, as he does kind of feel like a goofball, but he's a goofball that you do feel sorry for. He does come across as a good guy. Like, the reason he went to prison was because he was exposing corruption, but it was still a serious crime, so he had to go to prison. But the instant he gets out of prison, he doesn't want to go back to his old ways. He wants to do better just because he wants to see his daughter again. But of course, such a task would still be difficult, considering everything that happened with him. It also helps that no one wants to hire a former convict, especially Baskin Robbins. They'll always find out. So it does make you end up feeling sorry for him, and so when he does eventually return to crime to steal the Ant-Man suit, it is believable, and you understand his reasons for it. But it's actually the act of becoming Ant-Man that helps propel him to being a better person, as once he gets the suit, he's put in contact with people that want him to use his thieving skills, not to hurt people, but to help. And in this case, it's to make sure that a very powerful weapon, doesn't end up in the hands of monsters. And so you do feel sorry for, and you do actually start feeling for him and his connection with his daughter. You do end up rooting for him because you want him to succeed, because you want him to become a better man, if just for his daughter. And that's part of the motivation for why he's doing this. He's not doing this because he thinks that, oh, the world should be a better place. No, he wants to be a hero in his daughter's eyes, and he's trying his best to try and be a person that she can look up to, and he can care about, and make sure the world is safe for her to live in. And it's adorable and sweet, and I like that. And there are other emotional journeys throughout the film. Like, a common theme through this film seems to be fatherhood and just kind of connection with loved ones. Like, we got Scott's connection with Cassie as he tries his best to do everything he can to be worthy of the love he sees in her eyes. But then you got Hank and his strained relationship with both Cross and Hope, and they're all kind of parallel with each other. For Cross, he felt betrayed by Hank because Hank didn't tell him everything that he should have. And in his mind, all that information, like the stuff with the Pym particles and Ant-Man, that was stuff that was rightfully supposed to be his. And yet Hank seemed to just hoard it away. And as for Hope, she's emotionally distant from her dad because she feels that he's pushed her away, and there is a believable reason for that. He's after he lost his wife, he's been trying everything he could to try and save her, but in the process, he wound up neglecting his daughter. As after Janet's disappearance, he sent Hope away to boarding school, and so it did not exactly help their relationship. And the only reason Hope reached out to him for this is because she knows that what the greater threat with Cross, and even then she does start regretting that decision as the more Hank tries, as she keeps telling Hank, "Let me wear the suit. Let me wear the suit. I can do this better. I can do this better." Hank says, "No, I have someone better. I don't want you in that suit." And at first, it does seem like that he is just kind of being a jerk until we learn exactly what happened to Janet. And it does start making you realize that he doesn't want his daughter getting hurt or possibly killed, as it was this line of work that cost him his wife. And while Scott himself is not, and while Scott himself isn't really the, while Scott himself does say that he's kind of the expendable one, he also does kind of have his moments as he does start growing closer to Hank and Hope, specifically more with Hope. Hank is trying his best to be is trying to keep a good relationship with Scott, if just because he thinks he needs Scott's talents. But with Scott, but he needs, but we do, but there is kind of a budding romance between Hope and Scott. While at the end of the movie it feels kind of forced, it does feel a little forced when they ultimately start when Hank ends up catching them making out for a split second. There is still some nice chemistry in the film that we see, and it's actually pretty cute as we see her turning from an ice queen and just to start slowly respecting him and just starting to slowly respect him to when he gives good advice about it, when he gives good advice saying that he does care about you. He's using me so you don't get hurt. And bridges are ultimately mended when Hank does reveal what happened to Janet. And yeah, it does get emotional, and it does get emotional as Hope wants to know why he didn't tell her, and he says he did it to protect her. And yeah, it's emotional for both of them, as it allows them not only to mend after so many years of lies, but it also allows them to bond over the loss of someone they both cared about. In this case, Janet Van Dyne. And that's always nice. And then, of course, we got the action. And, of course, when you have a character called Ant-Man and his power shrinking, I feel like it was going to be a little hard making a good movie, some good action scenes of that. But surprisingly, they do it really well. As the action manages to mix the shrinking, and it's not like he shrinks at one point and then spends a certain amount of time as shrinking. No, he changes it up, and because he shrinks and grows at sporadic times, it allows him to catch his enemy off guard. We see how skilled he is. It actually really is nice, and I think the best example of that would be the battles with Falcon and Yellow Jacket. As we see the shrinking kind of working, as we see him integrating the shrinking and growing in throughout the battles, as he manages to use it to give himself advantages when he's losing it. See him jumping around, being able to take advantage of certain things when he could. It's actually really nice, and I think it's fun. And another thing is, I love the effects. The effects, of course, aren't great, but they are nice to look at. And seeing how the world looks when Scott is shrunk, it is really nice, and it does kind of give a Honey I Shrunk the Kids vibe, as you are kind of like entering another world, as something that would be normal for the rest of us is now suddenly a death trap when you're this small, even if you can punch really hard. So that's always nice. And then, of course, seeing them control the ants, and on top of that, seeing him control the ants is nice. And on top of that, it feels like that Ant-Man feels more at home in this film, as it feels more like an espionage movie instead of a full blockbuster action film. And for a character that can shrink like Ant-Man, a film like that would probably work out, as it allows him, since he can shrink, he can get into more areas and do more espionage, and again, it does helps everything work out. The acting, of course, is also great all around the board, and I think that's nice. Nice. Michael Douglas does a good job as Hank Pym. Another thing also is that, and of course, I think another positive I can give this film is just sorry, what was it? Yeah, I lost my train of thought. Sorry. I also love this film's sense of humor. Like is it like see like even in the fight scenes or even in certain things, and even other points where they can suddenly turn Thomas the Tank Engine into a weapon, or have ants suddenly look cute. have them be cute one second and then terrifying the next. Or even Luis. Luis is both is actually like Luis is obviously supposed to be kind of like a comic relief character, but he isn't an annoying comic relief character, and he's actually very capable at what he's doing. It's just that he kind of gets lost in his own head every once in a while. He's still competent and very good at what he does, even when he provides exposition, as he can just rush it out there, and it's actually really nice. It's actually really nice for the most part. In the beginning of the film, he does try going over Scott's history in San Quentin, and it does kind of feel a little out there. I think it's best that we saw like he apparently Scott has a degree in electrical engineering, which would explain how he was able to figure out how to shut off the regulator, etc. But again, it's not exactly great, but not exactly awful either. So yeah. But again, yeah. Luis is nice, and as for the other two characters, they're not bad. Dave and Kirk, yeah. But like with Thor's friends in the Thor films, they're there. They do their jobs. They do them well. So can't really doubt that. So I'm okay with them. Okay with them. They're more memorable than Thor's friends, though. That's a definite plus. With that being said, what are the flaws of this movie? Well, I think for starters, one flaw would kind of be. Honestly, I feel like the tone, while it's not a bad tone, does kind of make it feel a little lesser than other superhero films. Other connection, Other connections don't feel as grand as they should be, and some things kind of feel a little out there, like when, like, like Hank doesn't seem to actually like Hank kind of drops what happened to Janet kind of seemingly out of nowhere. So you can make an argument that it was built up a bit. There are some points where plot points seem to kind of feel a little just kind of feel like they come out of nowhere, though in other cases you can make the argument that it's just the plot changing so quickly. And I feel like the pacing isn't awful, but it does feel slightly rushed in some areas. And again, because the hero shrinks, and on top of that, it's hard to take a film called Ant-Man seriously. But again, to the film's credit, it does still try to have fun with it, and it does help you learn to enjoy it more. But I think one major flaw, once again, would have to be the villain, David Cross, aka Yellow Jacket. Yeah, this guy is just every generic villain trope that you can think of. Businessman, homicidal maniac, thinks, oh, I should have deserved more, yada yada yada, blah blah blah. It's just generic villain trite. I feel like, now, to be fair, the actor playing Cross looks like he's having a blast playing him, and fair enough. When you play the villain, you gotta have fun with the role, because when you're playing the villain, you can get away with a bit more than you could as a hero. But I didn't but I just kind of thought him as a whiny until he event. I just kept kind of thinking him as a whiny villain until he actually put on the yellow jacket suit. Otherwise, even then, where that posturing actually did feel like it had more weight to it, because now this was a pissed off guy with homicidal tendencies now wearing this powerful suit that can make him like a living bullet, and it can zap things that can fry zappers that can fry anything that comes across. That's a force to be reckoned with right there. So don't screw with that. But as a but before that, he did just feel like a generic villain, and I didn't see him as a major threat till he put on the yellow jacket suit. And yeah, to be fair, it does look intimidating. But again, that's like in the final third of the movie, and I've heard that kind of art compared to like the first Iron Man film, where the villain is just this business guy who creates a suit that's supposed to be an evil version of the hero suit, and then in the climax he puts it on, which results in both of them fighting. And fair enough, that is kind of what happens in Ant-Man. But I would still go on record and say that I think Obadiah Stane was much more compelling than this guy. Well, Obadiah Stane was also a greedy businessman. He had more charm and sophistication to him that actually made him feel more approachable. And even if you knew he was the villain, you'd still feel like you could have a decent conversation with him and get to know him before he stabbed you in the back. Whereas Cross, the instant he's in the room with him, you just kind of feel like you just kind of want to be as far away from him as possible. Like, he's just so obviously a villain. On top of that, another minor flaw is, I think, the connection to the other Avengers films. Now, again, seeing Ant-Man actually fight with Falcon was fun, but was it needed? Like, did it advance anything in the story? Now, I guess you could say it advanced stuff for later films, as it made Falcon aware of Ant-Man's presence, so they could call him for later movies. But in the context of this movie, did it do anything? No, it's mostly just there as an Easter egg. There is no really ongoing plot for this one. It's just mostly standalone, except for like that one section in the middle where they break into Avengers Mansion to get the device they need to get Hank's device. And of course and then of course, and then after that, the next time it's actually referenced is at the end when Ant-Man's revealed that he's got an in with the Avengers. So I guess it worked out for the most part. Just in the context of the movie, it feels a little out there, so to speak. I don't know. I feel like it could. I feel like it could have been done. I feel like I don't think it's bad, and it does help later films. It's just that in the context of this movie, it feels like it's just pushed in, and that does kind of a minor flaw. Otherwise, the film is like it feels like it could have been more self-contained. Like the pacing in some areas does feel slightly rushed, not enough to ruin everything, but that way the villain is cartoony and just kind of weird, and some of the fan service here does feel a little too out there. But I don't think that ruins the movie at all. Like it's still a fun movie. Like the effects are nice, the acting is great, the action is really nice. It's got a great tone with a tense mood to it as we see the heroes doing everything they can, as we see the heroes trying to just secretly break into this base without being caught. It's really nice. The characters are nice, are well written for them, are well written. Oh, I guess that's another thing. I suppose that's one thing, but despite the connection with Scott and his daughter, I think she's only in it. Not she's like you obviously get the connection between them, but she's not in the film as much as she thinks she could be. But then again, maybe you don't want overexposure of kid characters. I don't know. But but again, good acting, good effects, fun action, great tense mood, and with some nice arcs that I think do connect to each other. Nice designs. Oh yeah, another thing. Yeah, I do like the designs. Oh yeah, Quantum Realm. I love it. It's surreal, strange, and it's just a marvel to look at. I thought it was really nice. But yeah, on the whole, Ant Man I think is a good movie. It's not a great movie, but it's very good and a lot of fun, and I would highly recommend it if you haven't checked it out yet. So yeah, that's all for this. That's all for this video. So tune in next week as we finally get into Phase 3 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and well, the lines are drawn in the sand, people. As next time we meet, we're going to be taking a look at Captain America: Civil War.